Oh, good. Okay. So we're going to read from chapter 27 of Proverbs. Okay. Don't brag about tomorrow, since you don't know what the day will bring. Let someone else praise you, not your own mouth. Danger, not your own lips. A stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but the resentment caused by a fool is even heavier. Anger is cruel and wrath is like a flood, but jealousy is even more dangerous. An open rebuke is better than hidden love. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. A person who is full refuses honey, but even bitter food tastes sweet to the hungry. A person who strays from home is like a bird that strays from its nest. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. Never abandon a friend, either yours or your father's. When disaster strikes, you won't have to ask your brother for assistance. It's better to go to a neighbor than to a brother who lives far away. Be wise, my child, and make my heart glad. Then I will be able to answer my critics. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. Get security from someone who guarantees a stranger's debt. Get a deposit if he does it for foreigners. A loud and cheerful greeting early in the morning will be taken as a curse. A quarrelsome wife is as annoying as constant dripping on a rainy day. Stopping her complaints are like trying to stop the wind or trying to hold something with greased hands. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. As workers who tend a fig tree are allowed to eat the fruit, so workers who protect their employees' interests will be rewarded. As a face is reflected in water, so the heart reflects the real person. Just as death and destruction are never satisfied, so human desire is never satisfied. Fire tests the purity of silver and gold, but a person is tested by being praised. You cannot separate fools from their foolishness, even though you grind them like grain with mortar and pestle. Know the state of your flocks and put your heart into caring for your herds. For riches don't last forever, and the crown might not be passed to the next generation. After the hay is harvested and the new crop appears, and the mountain grasses are gathered in, your sheep will provide wool for clothing, and your goats will provide the price of a field, and you will have enough goat's milk for yourself, your family, and your servant girls. So, 2 weeks ago, we talked about what? Come on, guys. Yes, it was leadership. 2 weeks ago, we talked about leadership in chapter 25. And we talked specifically about the weight and the burden of leadership and how difficult it is to be a leader. Specifically in regard to the depth of responsibility placed on a person who's in leadership. It's something that people can't really empathize with unless they're looking at it from the position of leadership. And then they would empathize with it, and they wouldn't take a leader carelessly or flippantly. Last week, we talked about like 5 different topics. And for me, it was kind of a difficult sermon to give because I had like 5 different topics floating around. It wasn't very focused on one topic, and I know that can be really difficult for you guys. So, now we're at chapter 27, and we skipped ahead to chapter 27. What do you think we're talking about? What's it talking about here? What is the underlying thread that's being talked about in this passage? Don't brag about tomorrow, since you don't know what the day will bring. Let someone else praise you, not your own mouth. A stranger, not your own lips. A stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but the resentment caused by a fool is even heavier. Anger is cruel and wrath is like a flood, but jealousy is even more dangerous. What do you think we're going to talk about? When we talked about leadership, what was the attitude involved in leadership that brought leadership to the ground? Entitlement. Entitlement is a form of what we're going to talk about today. Entitlement could be the seed of it. What happens when somebody is entitled? Kevin, when you feel that you're entitled to something and somebody else has it, what would you call that? What would happen to you? How would you feel about that person? Jealous. Anger is cruel and wrath is like a flood, but jealousy is even more dangerous. Today, we're going to talk about entitlement in terms of jealousy. And no, Kevin, I did not pick you because you have a problem with being jealous. Just making sure. Just making sure. Okay, I would have picked Lucas. I'm just kidding. So, when we look at being a leader, one of the things that we talked about before was this concept of entitlement. How does jealousy play out in terms of entitlement? Why is jealousy important in terms of being a leader? Why is it important for a leader to understand what jealousy is and how it can affect things? Give me some ideas. All right, let's take it out of the realm of the philosophical and let's put it into practical things. You've got employees, and there's a jealousy issue with your employees. Go. Doesn't matter. Okay, so how does that play out? How does it play out when employees are jealous? Okay, not working for the group. What was that? Start talking trash. Good. What else? Right. There's a communication breakdown. So basically, you have a single unit, and that single unit begins to dissipate because of jealousy. And we saw that earlier in chapter 25, and we actually see that here. It says, a stone is heavy. In verse 3, it says, a stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but the resentment caused by a fool is even heavier. Now, notice that this verse comes directly after verse 2. Verse 2 says, let someone else praise you, not your own mouth. What's the wisdom in that statement? Let somebody else praise you. Don't do it from yourself. Don't do it from your own mouth. And then immediately after, it says, a stone is heavy, a sand is weighty, but the resentment caused by a fool is even heavier. Who is the fool in this case? The person who praises themselves, right? The resentment that is caused by a fool is even heavier. Anger is cruel, wrath is bad, but jealousy is even more dangerous. Understand here that jealousy is being placed on a very, very, very high pedestal. What are the things that jealousy is capable of doing that things like anger and wrath are not? Why is jealousy more dangerous? You put a gun in my hand and I'm angry. I may shoot somebody, right? We call that a crime of passion. What does jealousy breed? Intent. That's no longer manslaughter, right? That's no longer a crime of passion. That is a crime of intent. It's murder one. Got it? There's something that's really, really deep-seated about jealousy. So, I want to go to Exodus chapter 20. Let's go to Exodus chapter 20. Apparently I'm not online. There we go. Then God gave the people all these instructions. I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. What am I reading here? The Ten Commandments, okay? I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God before me. You must not make for yourself an idol of any kind or an image of anything in the heavens or on the earth or in the sea. You must not bow to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God who will not tolerate your affection for any other gods. I lay the sins of the parents upon their children. The entire family is affected, even children in the third and the fourth generation of those who reject me. But I lavish unfailing love for 1,000 generations on those who love me and obey my commands. You must not misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you go unpunished if you misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you... Remember to observe the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You have 6 days each week for your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any work. This includes you, your sons, your daughters, your male and female servants, your livestock, any foreigners living among you. For in 6 days the Lord made the heaven, the earth, the sea, and everything in them, but on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and set it apart as holy. Honor your father and mother, then you'll live a long life, full life, in the land the Lord your God is giving you. You must not murder. You must not commit adultery. This thing keeps jumping around on me. Okay, there it is. You must not steal. You must not testify falsely against your neighbor. You must not covet your neighbor's house, your neighbor's wife, male or female servant, ox or donkey, or anything else that belongs to your neighbor. And when the people heard the thunder and the loud blast of the ram's horn, and when they saw the flashes of lightning and the smoke billowing from the mountain, they stood at a distance, trembling with fear. Two really important things. Obviously, there's more. But there's two really, really important things in that passage. This is the Ten Commandments, okay? The Ten Commandments is the infrastructure for society. And I'm talking about Western society here. It's also the infrastructure for just straight-up society. Like if you go to the Eastern cultures, for instance, the Ten Commandments are widely accepted both in Islam and in Jewish culture. It's like the top of everything, you know? It's in like our court buildings and everywhere. It is the groundwork for society. Yeah, you can talk about Hammurabi's Code and Babylon and all that stuff. But as it stands, the Ten Commandments is the infrastructure for society. And what do we find within the Ten Commandments? What are the two main things that are always talked about in regard to the Ten Commandments? The first 5 commandments are about who? God. The first 5 commandments are about God. The second 5 commandments are about who? Others. And this is why Jesus, when the Pharisees ask him, what is the greatest commandment? He says to them, there are only 2 commandments, not 10. Love God, love your neighbor. But there's something more involved in the Ten Commandments here. There's a concept, an underlying concept, and it has to do with entitlement. So what is the concept that's present? It's the very first thing talked about in the Ten Commandments. When we deal with the first 5, God sets himself up as a what? A jealous God. Now we talked about jealousy as being something that is really deep-seated and has really, really negative consequences. Right? We also talk about entitlement as being really, really deep-seated and really, really negative. But there is a caveat to that. And what would that be? What if you actually are entitled? I don't mean what if you're entitled like you have an attitude, but I mean what if you really do deserve what it is that you want? Now, all of us know better than that, right? All of us know better, well, most of us know better than to say that I deserve everything there is in the universe. Most of us, when we're being really honest, especially with our partners, our thought process is, I really don't deserve that person who loves me that way, right? And that is when you see the greatest lines in movies, for instance, when you know that that person finally broke and understands their relationship because they don't deserve how good that other person is to them. But if there is a God, he would have to be deserving of that, right? He would have to be deserving of everything. Otherwise, he wouldn't be God. Do you understand that concept? Because if God is the standard for everything, then really everything belongs to him. Everything is derivative of him. Everything is a lesser version of him. So he would be deserving of it. It's like saying, I created this character. If the character denies your existence, let's say I created Homer Simpson, okay? If Homer Simpson, sorry, I know that's really targeted. If Homer Simpson denies Matt Groening's existence, that would be offensive, right? Why? Because Matt Groening created him. He is the universe to Homer Simpson, okay? So there is a circumstance where entitlement makes sense. And that is with God. There's only one circumstance, really, where entitlement makes sense. And that is with God. So there's two things that play out there. One, if you have a God who's not entitled, then that's a lame God. If you have a God who doesn't care that people walk all over them, then that's a lame God. I mean, what would you think if Matt Groening said, I don't really care that Homer Simpson thinks I don't exist? Or has decided to call somebody else his creator? You would think that Matt Groening is stupid. Right? And that's the reality of it. Now, that's one side of it, that's a lame God. But the second reality is that God, because he's entitled, has a certain right to humanity. And when that right is put in a specific context, it gives us a responsibility. Thus, the Ten Commandments. The reason why we have an infrastructure for society built in the Ten Commandments is because it is derivative of a higher standard. It's the same reason why I can say that child molestation is bad across the board. And human beings, unless there's something really wrong with them, understand that. I don't have to justify and go back to every society's laws and say, well, on this day, this case happened, and we decided this was really bad, and so over 1,000 years, we've developed this idea that child molestation is wrong. No, there's something that's innate in human beings that that there's something that's not right about that. And some societies, may not care about that, but it's looked down upon, or it's a hidden thing that's accepted. Why would it be hidden? Because we know it's wrong. So, with that said, there's a responsibility. The Ten Commandments has 5 responsibilities in the beginning. 5 responsibilities specifically to God, where he calls himself a jealous God. And then it has 5 responsibilities afterwards, specifically to others. Where does jealousy play out in that? Where does jealousy play out in the last 5 commandments? Do not murder. Do not steal. Do not commit adultery. Where does this play out? Do not covet. Tell me, what is the difference between coveting and murdering and stealing, committing adultery? Tell me what the difference is. Give me something more tangible. People who murder don't have a desire? That's true, except for that's not murder. That's killing. And when we go back and we look at the Hebrew word for murder, which, forgive me, I don't have on me, but that's what you're going to find. You're going to find that term is not do not kill. It's do not murder. So, what's the difference? When we steal something, see, that's my girl. Because she knows this already. The difference between the last 5 commandments and the term covet versus everything else is that murdering and stealing and committing adultery, those all happen where? In the physical world. Where does coveting happen? In here. It's jealousy. It's in here, right? So, what happens in here makes it possible for the other 4 to be broken. Because a person who murders is entitled to the taking of another person's life, is jealous of that person's life. And I don't care whatever euphemism you want to use to make it right. For instance, Saddam Hussein should be murdered because, he's a dictator and a terrible person who's committed all these atrocities, and a 40-cent solution, with a bullet is the right way to go. I don't care whatever, Republican way you want to make it right. It is putting yourself in a position of jealousy with God. Because who is the one person who can make that statement? God, not us. So, now whether a ruler has been put in that position by God and has to make those hard decisions, I'm just thankful I'm not one of those people who has to make those decisions, and that's not my decision to make. But with that said, I know that on a scriptural level, we're not supposed to murder, and that murder is an element built out of jealousy, built out of covetousness. So, what about stealing? Do I have to justify that stealing comes from jealousy? No. What about adultery? Do I have to justify that adultery comes from jealousy? I should hear a no. I mean, that's pretty obvious. Think about that. Think about the gravity of the concept of jealousy. And think about it in reference, not just to you as a person, but then to God. God calls himself a jealous God. He calls himself a jealous God. Are you to be jealous? Is there ever a time when it makes sense for you to be jealous? Yes. How do I justify that? I just spent the first half of my sermon talking about how jealousy is a bad thing, how God's the only person who's allowed to be entitled. How do I justify, then, that it's okay for you to be jealous at times? What is the caveat? What? Yeah. Because we're made in God's image. And so because we're made in God's image, it's okay for us to be derivative of that image. It's not okay for us to place ourselves above the line, but it's okay for us to place ourselves below the line. To understand that there's an order of submission, a pecking order. And if you're at this place in the line, it is okay for you to be jealous of things that you're entitled to. But there's a right way and a wrong way to be entitled. Now, when we go back and we look at this, the wrong way to be entitled. Don't brag about tomorrow, since you don't know what the day will bring. When I look at that, I read, don't brag about tomorrow, because you're not God. See? You don't know what the day will bring. Let someone else praise you, not your own mouth. Because you're not your own standard. What is God's name? He presents himself as I am, Yahweh. And he gives that standard because there is no other description available for him. Because up to this point, people may have described him as that thing in the mountains, or that thing that makes the world turn. But those aren't really good descriptions, right? And how could they be? Because if he's God, then those things aren't big enough to describe him. So what is the only measure he can use to describe himself? Himself. I am who I am. We can't say that. Let someone else praise you, not your own mouth. When you praise yourself, what are you effectively saying? I am the standard. When somebody praises themselves, what do we sometimes hear people saying? Do you think you've arrived? Have you heard that? Like, do you think you've arrived? Don't think that you've arrived. Don't think you're a big shot. Calling yourself the standard is praising yourself. When it says, a stone is heavy and sand is weighty, but the resentment caused by a fool is even heavier. We talked about that earlier. It is a heavy thing to create a standard like that. Now, an open rebuke is better than hidden love. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. A person who is full refuses honey, but even bitter food tastes sweet to the hungry. A person who strays from home is like a bird that strays from its nest. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is sweet as perfume and incense. Never abandon a friend, either yours or your father's. When disaster strikes, you won't have to ask your brother for assistance. It's better to go to a neighbor than to a brother who lives far away. How does that little passage fall into this concept of being responsible with entitlement and staying away from being jealous? Okay. Yeah, that works. Any other ideas? What does it mean when it says an open rebuke is better than hidden love? Think about that statement. Why are rebuke and love paired against each other? When somebody rebukes you, how do you feel? We see this time and time and time again in Proverbs. A fool does not accept criticism. An open rebuke is better than hidden love. Think about this. There are two people in this statement, right? There's a person who openly rebukes, and there's a person with hidden love. Tell me about the intent of the person who is openly rebuking. Do we know that? We know they're honest, but do we know their intent? No. We only know the intent of the person who has the hidden love, right? Which one's better? Because honesty about the situation is far better than hiding love. Really what it's saying is that hiding love is bad. It's not really talking about an open rebuke here. It's talking about hiding how you feel about your friend. And it continues to go on. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy. Think about that statement. Wounds from a sincere friend. We do not like it when people wound us. We do not like it when people are harsh with us. But according to this passage, it is much more important to be wounding. I don't even know what term I would use for to be sharping, I don't know. It's much more important to be, oh man, the word's in my mind. Harsh. That's still not the word I'm looking for. It'll come back to me in a moment. It's much more important to be harsh than to give many kisses. Now, think about that in terms of the statement before it. An open rebuke and then many kisses. Rebuke is negative, but it's better than hiding love. Okay? Rebuke is perceived as harshness, it's struggle, but it's better than hiding love. Here, many kisses are perceived as negative also. See, the reality of it is that it's really, really, really important that we understand what it is that our intent is. And this little passage right here is really getting into the meat of that. It says, even a person who is full refuses honey, but even bitter food tastes sweet to the hungry. A person who strays from home is like a bird that strays from its nest. The heartfelt counsel of a friend is as sweet as perfume and incense. This concept of jealousy is really, really heavily involved here. It's about coveting. It's about sweetness. It's about wanting things that don't belong to you. It's about straying out of your comfort zone and finding that you didn't get what you should have. That's why it talks about the nest. The heartfelt a person who strays from home is like a bird that strays from its nest. What is that bird doing? It's wanting something that doesn't necessarily belong to it. It's going out ahead of its time. A person who strays from home is like a bird that strays from its nest. Earlier, a person who is full refuses honey, but even bitter food tastes sweet to the hungry. We only want what tastes good, but a wise person wants what is good. Yeah, even if it's bitter. Why is that? What is it about us that makes us want to do that? It says, never abandon a friend, either yours or your father's. When disaster strikes, you won't have to ask your brother for assistance. It's better to go to a neighbor than to a brother who lives far away. Think about that statement. It's better to go to your neighbor than it is to your brother. What's the concept behind that? It's important. It's important for us to stay within our means. It's important for us to stay within our area. It's important for us to stay within what is around us, what God has given us. If we stray from that, then we're going to end up with bad things, even if they seem good. If we try to give people too much of something that seems good, it can become bad. Listen to this. Be wise, my child. Make my heart glad, then I will be able to answer my critics. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precautions, but the simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. Get security from someone who guarantees a stranger's death. Get a deposit if he does it for foreigners. A loud and cheerful greeting early in the morning will be taken as a curse. A quarrelsome wife is as annoying as constant dripping on a rainy day. Stopping her complaints is like trying to stop the wind or trying to hold something with greased hands. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. When we go back and we look at get a deposit if he does it for foreigners, in the Greek and the Latin, it doesn't say get it for foreigners. It says for a promiscuous woman. So this is how it actually reads. Get security from someone who guarantees a stranger's debt. Get a deposit if he does it for a promiscuous woman. A loud and cheerful greeting early in the morning will be taken as a curse. A quarrelsome wife is as annoying as a constant dripping on a rainy day. This whole section is connected to each other. What's it talking about? Be wise, my child, make my heart glad, then I will be able to answer my critics. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequence. And then all of a sudden it's talking about dripping faucets. It's talking about greased up hands. What's it talking about? Why do you have a quarrelsome wife? Did you hear what Rose said? It's because you chose poorly. Why do you have a quarrelsome wife? It's because you chose poorly. It's because you wanted something that you shouldn't have wanted. A prudent person foresees danger and takes precaution. The simpleton goes blindly on and suffers the consequences. So get security from someone who guarantees that this will be okay. Make sure that you get a deposit if that person's a whore. Because a loud and cheerful greeting in the morning, that's not good. And a wife who quarrels with you is like a dripping faucet. Do you understand the connection? You cannot covet. If you covet, if you try to take something that doesn't belong to you, you can have it. And that's the problem. Think about that in terms of America. Think about it in terms of America. I was reading an article this week about Pokemon. And it was an article by, I don't know, Jerry Falwell or one of those people. And it was talking about how Pokemon is the devil. Because Pokemon sets up an infrastructure where kids are constantly trying to catch them all. Catch them all. Catch them all. Okay. Where kids are coveting. Is that what we're talking about here? Are you sure? I know John thinks we are. John's anti-Pokemon. He won't buy Pokemon with us. Is that what we're talking about here? Are we talking about this concept of you got to catch them all, and so it's coveting or being jealous? How about DRM? How about the latest music came out, and I want it, so I'm going to download it as a torrent? Am I coveting? Am I being jealous because Kevin has the newest album and I want to get mine, so I'm going to download it as a torrent? Is that coveting? How about somebody has a new jacket and they got it at Forever 21 and it's so amazing, so I'm going to go to Forever 21 and get a new jacket. Is that coveting? Where do we draw the line? I will always remember, without going into too much detail, this one guy who said to me that as Christians, it is reprehensible that we park close to a building. Because the first must be last, and that shows that we are coveting that first spot. And so we can't park close to that building because, we're not supposed to be like that as Christians. We should make sure to take as far away from that building as possible in that parking lot. Is that coveting? What do you think? Don't all of us get angry when we see that there's no spots up close to the building? I do. I'll be honest with you, I do. Where do we draw the line? As workers who tend a fig tree. Oh, my bad. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. As workers who tend a fig tree are allowed to eat the fruit, so workers who protect their employees' interests will be rewarded. As a face is reflected in water, so the heart reflects the real person. Just as death and destruction are never satisfied. Oh, sorry, moving on too quickly. Where do we draw the line? Look at that statement again. As iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. What does that mean? The only way for you to get sharp, it's to be balanced. It's to allow for conflict. But you never, if you don't want things. So the trick is to want the things that you should. Does that make sense? Now, it seems really easy. It seems like common sense. But as we look at our lives, we have to ask the question, is my life filled with the things that it should be filled with? That's the question that we have to ask. Do I always want the nicest things? How about this? Maybe if I don't always want the nicest things. When I look around my house, is it full of junk? When I look around my house, is it full of things that I don't use? Let's take it out of the context of that. Let's put it in the context of something more esoteric, which I know you guys love. When I look at my time, and I look at my relationships, is it filled with relationships that don't matter? Do I always need somebody to like my post? Do I have 600 friends on my Facebook account? When I spend my time with people and I look around and I see them, are these people that I can talk to about anything? Are these people who are invested if I fail in life? Are these people who are going to care whether I live or die? And I don't mean will they show up to my funeral. I mean will it hurt them? Because the reality of it is that we don't really think in those terms. We like to say we do. All of us like to say we do. But we don't. We don't think in those terms. A good way to know that is who we invite to our weddings. A good way to know that is who we care sees our posts. A good way to know that is who we think of when we want to hang out versus who we think of when we want to talk about something that's, desperate. Do we ever think in those terms? Think about your life. Think about your life and ask yourself, do you surround yourself with people that matter? Or are you just placating people that you're in the area with? Because I went to high school with them. Or because I go to the same church. Because that's not right. That's not wise. That breeds an environment of jealousy. Why would that breed an environment of jealousy? Work those brains. Why would that breed an environment of jealousy? What happens when you put people together casually in a high-stress environment? What? Yeah, they destroy each other. Why is Survivor such a great show in terms of its ratings? Because you've taken these people who have no association with each other and you watch them become chaotic. Now, as human beings, what do we know should happen? Well, if we're listening to Locke and Hobbes, what would happen? Social contract theory, right? What would happen is that people will band together in order to reach a common goal, a common cause. And we see that. They're called alliances, right? But the moment that it's not convenient anymore, those alliances tear apart the group. Put that on a macro scale. What does that look like? That looks like America ending itself within 100 years. Because, why? Because we're not fighting for any single cause. Because we don't have a unified structure. You cannot exist for a very long time without a unified structure. That's why pretty much every type of society on the face of the planet has ceased to exist over time. That's why you have nothing that you can think of that's been around since the dawn of time. Why? Because everything eats itself. Why is that? Why is it that everything destroys itself? Why does communism not work? Yes, because we're not machines. Because human beings have a problem. What is that problem? Entitlement. Here's that problem. Where is that? Just as death and destruction are never satisfied, so human desire is never satisfied. That's the problem. Human desire. Human desire to have things that we don't need, to be something that we aren't, to want things that don't belong to us. The first measure of that, the first measure for putting it in the right perspective is what? How do we involve the destruction of mankind itself? How do we involve? No. How do we avoid? Yes. How do we avoid the cosmic destruction of mankind itself? I'm asking you a giant, age-old question. Buddha said that we don't avoid the destruction of mankind. We bypass it. Okay? Evolutionists say that we don't avoid the destruction of mankind. We bypass it. Eschatological, people standing on the side of the road with cardboard signs. They don't say that we avoid destruction. They say it's coming. The end. I, for one, am not willing to die that way. How do we avoid the cosmic destruction of mankind? How do we do that? It's an age-old question. Every belief system answers that question in its own way. America answers that question how? We buy our way out of it. That's how we do it. Hubris. We bury ourselves with our guard, like the Egyptians. We create for ourselves a fortune, and we build technologies. We're in what? What state are we in? If America is in a state of loss, if humankind is in a state of loss and America is one of those people on the map of humankind, what state is America in? Denial. It's the first stage of loss. You can't do anything about loss unless you go through the stages. America's in the first stage of loss. It's in the denial stage. Are you in the denial stage? Because if you are a jealous person, and if jealousy is in your life, and you look around and you find that it's filled with things that you don't need, and it's filled with your eyes wandering to things that you don't need, and it's filled with want for things that you don't need, you're in denial. Because that will not solve any issues. It will only make it worse. The only sure way for you to avoid that, is to come to acceptance. The only sure way for you to avoid ending that way is to come to acceptance. And there's only one belief system that comes to acceptance, that takes death and embraces it and says, I got it. I understand it. I'm guilty of it. But it's not the end. There's consequence for it, and I need to pay the price for it, but it's not the end. Every other belief system, whether it is pantheism, whether it is atheism, whether it is something more specific, like the philosophical leap of faith. Whether it's that I need to make an irrational leap because I need to believe in something. Every other belief system breaks down. True wisdom is found in understanding your beginning stage, in being honest. Honesty can be found in understanding that there's really only two things you need to do in life, which are what? Love God and love your neighbor. Everything else, all of this passage in Proverbs, all of the other 30 passages in Proverbs that are there, every one of them say the same thing. All the other books in the Bible say the same thing, just in different ways. Love God, love your neighbor. That's it. But to do that, you have to be honest. In order for you to be honest, you have to set your focus in the right place. If your focus is on everything that you can get, if your focus is on being entitled, if your focus is on making money, if your focus is on making sure that you don't die, if your focus is on all these things, they're going to get you. And that's the reality of it. You cannot separate fools from their foolishness. Even though you grind them like grain with mortar and pestle, know the state of your flocks, put your heart into caring for your herds. For riches, they don't last forever. And the crown, it may not be passed to the next generation. After the hay is harvested and the new crop appears and the mountain grasses are gathered in, your sheep will provide wool for clothing, your goats will provide for the price of the field, and you will have enough goat's milk for yourself, your family, and your servant girls. The reality of it is that if you want a simple life, then a simple life is not going to be filled with getting things. It's not going to be filled with consumerism. It's not going to be filled with having the most friends. It's not going to be filled with having the most games. It's not going to be filled with having the most money. It's not going to be filled with having, the best, most lively conversations or having the most sex. It's not going to be filled with any of those things. And don't get me wrong, those things are great. They're fun. They're nice to have. But they fade. They fade. And while they're fading, your clock is counting down. Like in that Justin Timberlake movie. Is that what it's called? Oh. While they fade, your clock is counting down. People who say they want a simple life. People who say they just want to do good. People who say, I don't want to, I don't want my life to be filled with struggle. Refocus. You want that? It's here. It's available to you. But all you have to do, which is the hardest part of all, is be honest. And that is the hardest thing for people to do. Because I don't want to say I'm a sinner. I don't want to say that I need God. I don't want to say, once I've said those things, that I need to do more than saying those things. I want to say once, I don't want to say I'm a sinner. And then after I've said that I'm a sinner, I don't want to say that he needs to teach me anything. And then after I've said that I do need to be taught things, then I don't want to say that I need to be connected to a body. And then after that, I don't want to say that I have a responsibility to that body to show up to church. And then once I've decided that, then I don't want to say that I have a responsibility to do things in that body, to work for that body to work. I don't want to take ownership. That's what life is about. I don't want to take ownership. What I want is for things to be what? Given to me. That's what our minds are on. That's what our mindset is on. That's what our heart is on. I don't want to have to think about the answer to life. I want it to be given to me. And if I don't know it, if I can't figure it out, if I have to work to figure it out, then it must not be true. The reality is that people are working too hard. When we go around and we look at these people who live, what in their minds is compulsory or lavish, we look at them as being in despair. When I look at Hoarders, for instance, the show, what is it, A&E or something? Yeah. When I look at Hoarders, what I see is people with compulsion who are trying to do what? Live a simple life. And whenever they're talked to about it, their thought process is, this is just, it's just me. Let's not over psychologize it. It's just me. When I look at people who have terrible, terrible relationships, what is it that they always say? It's just, I always end up with the wrong guy. I couldn't possibly have chosen to end up with the wrong guy. It always happens. Because in their mind, that's a simple life. But it's not simple. It's much more difficult. Being without God is much more difficult. Being a Christian who is without God, or as I have now termed it, stupid for Jesus, is much more difficult than struggling to take my cravings for things and to put them in check. And to say, no, I shouldn't be jealous for that. That's not being honest with who I am. I don't deserve to go a step further. I'll take a step further if God gives it to me, but I'm not entitled to it. There's no reason that I should have to park as close to Walmart as I can. There's no reason at all. I shouldn't be mad about those things. Michaela always gets mad at me because I am notorious for being not road rage, like I don't road rage, and I don't flip people off out the window or whatever, but I'm notorious for getting angry about bad driving. I will say here and now, if you will make a commitment to working on understanding your place and your honesty and your jealousy, I will make a commitment to consider whether it is that I am doing those things out of entitlement as well. Just saying. I choose my words carefully. We need to consider where we're coming from. That's the reality. You're having issues in your relationship, you need to consider where you're coming from. Are you being jealous? Are you being entitled? Are you trying to take something that doesn't belong to you? Or are you being humble? And are you allowing praise to come to you? Are you getting mad because your head didn't get patted? Because your wife didn't tell you you did a good job? I know I get mad. Am I entitled to that? I shouldn't be. If your life is not working enough for you, you have to consider, are you being entitled? Are you thinking that, what you need is money? Or what you need is friends? Or what you need is stuff? Or are you being honest with yourself? That instead of looking outward, you need to look inward? That you need to fix your perspective on God and on man, and you do that by not coveting. These are all things that we need to consider. And wisdom is foundational in that process. And what is wisdom? Fear of God. Not Halloween fear. Not horror fear. But an understanding of who God is and my place in that whole scheme of things. It is not by accident that the first 5 commandments of the 10 Commandments are all about fearing God. And they all take place in here. And it's not by accident that the last of the 5 commandments, that the 10 commandments are bookend by also taking place in here. So, this is not one of those things where we can just say, if you do this, then it's all good. It's one of those things where you have to do this. You have to ask yourselves, is this right? If this isn't right, then that won't be right. And I guarantee you, if that isn't right, then you can trace it back to here. Okay? Okay. So let's pray to close.